Hi, I'm Toby Vernon, a partner with Simpatico Studios, where we live stream conversations about complex business and social challenges with professionals like you who are working on the same issues. Our shows are live streamed in front of a global audience, and I'm hosting Simpatico's Food and Agriculture channel, where we're growing a community of farmers, researchers, agricultural businesses, policymakers, scientists, and technology leaders that are addressing food and ag's most vexing challenges, one innovative solution at a time. And today we're joined by Dr. Chandrashekhar Biradar. Dr. Biradar is a principal scientist and research team leader at the International Center for Agricultural Research in Dry Areas. That's a CGIAR research center in Cairo, Egypt. Dr. Biradar's work focuses on biodiversity farming for diet diversity, wellness, and planetary health. He's the son of a farmer with multidisciplinary educational backgrounds in forestry, agriculture, genetic engineering, and space applications, with a research focus on revitalizing agroecosystems for nutritional and ecological security. Dr. Biradar, it's truly a pleasure to have you with us today. I'm so grateful for you making the time. We're gonna have a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we're gonna really tuck into your work here throughout this episode. And before we do that, I just wanted to kind of see how you're doing in Cairo and find out a little bit from you what kind of challenges the COVID-19 era is presenting to your work, and how you're getting along in this wild and difficult time.
Yeah, certainly the COVID they put a lot of challenges because of we are working in the agricultural systems, and we cannot stop that food production. So we have to keep going, and of course the farmers cannot lock down like the city people who can do. So that we have to keep going the system productions. So we cannot lock down the production systems. The food is need, food and water we cannot avoid. So even we can skip the medicine, but the food and water is most essential. And the same thing that the world faced the COVID, and we in the dry areas of the world have the most critical as well, because of the most poor people live in this part of the world. And shutting down means they also suffer a lot of this employment and transportation, food systems. So, it's a bit challenging, but we are living in the most what is called dry areas of the world, and most resilient part of the system. So we have to cope up with the way we are dealing with now. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that farmers, have your support, have your expertise, because obviously nutritional support is paramount at all times, obviously, but now sort of more than ever. And that brings us sort of this question of how we can advance individual and community and ecological health, which is an area that you focus on in your research. And you sort of reconceptualize conventional notions of health with this idea of introducing vital foods, and very focused on the role of vital foods in achieving a more balanced relationship between producers and consumers. Tell us about vital foods and why it's so important.
Yeah, this is the very important questions you asked about vital food. We often think that is a food means anything you can eat, but most of the food we are eating is like a sterile food. Nothing is there in the food. Most of the nutrition is gone. So just we are eating the empty calories. So that's what we call is the two level of the hunger. So one is on the calorie side, and the other is the nutrition side. So when the COVID declared as a pandemic, and I start looking into all these different options of the food systems, I come across the tons of the different options people they used to cope up with the pandemics like situations. The one of the most the primary things that I ever come across is the nutrition. So the nutrition should come from the diversity of food. Given the body required huge amount of the nutritional elements, that like a healthy body required at least 300 to 400 different types of the food elements, because of their gut biome lives on the diversity to eat. And that gut bio So that's what helps us to the fight for our immune systems and build our immune systems. And but where to get this the diversity of the food? It had to become from the diversity of the cropping systems. So this is where we are emphasizing the agroecosystems, where we have to move towards the what's called more crop diversity,
Mm-hmm.
and biodiversity. If there is a lot of the biodiversity is there, then you have the diversity in your plate. So that your what you eat in your plate, there's a diversity of the food and vitality, also like what you call in the prana of the food. So that comes from the how food is grown, how food is preserved, how food is transported. So it's all that matters to the healthy eating. So this is where we see that if we eat healthy people, looking at all the survey, you can look into the every people they having the healthy diet systems and a bit of physical exercises. They are coping up with most of the diseases. Like the COVID is not a big issue for them.
Mm. That's interesting, and I think that like making that distinction between cropping systems that focus on a single monoculture, which is pretty commonplace in all around the world, right? And making the distinction between the we talk a lot about the ecological problems with monocultures, but I don't think we talk quite as much about the nutritional problems. And can you share a little bit about the sort of range in crop types and crop diversity that you focus on, and how that's different from the conventional system that we might be a little bit more familiar with?
See, the fortunately, and the world is blessed with huge amount of the crop diversity and what you call germplasms, wild relatives, heirlooms, and the CGI also blessed with the number of the gene banks, and they hold a lot of the diversity to this diversity. And in order to bring that diversity so back to the food systems, and in order to meet our immediate demand in the past, so we focused on the yield and just focused on the only few crops. So there's a huge diversity is there in the system, but you lack creativity on cultivating them. So
Mm.
this is where we are working on towards bringing the diversity back to the farming systems. And here we see out of the 150 dominant cropping systems like a crops, and there is significantly they can be cultivated across the world, but only about 4 to 5 crops they dominate the world, and that contribute about nearly 60% of the world nutrition security.
Mm.
Sorry, world food security, not a nutrition security. So this is where we need to bring the more diversity. And one way to bring like look at the, like either wheat or the rice or the corn. So you can always go the monocropping system. So you can introduce the pulses, the forgotten pulses. The pulse is the kind of the pulse of the planet. It's good for the people and good for the planet. So
Mm-hmm.
we can bring them into the cereal-based system so that it can address several the like a key issue here, whether the nutrition for the people or
Mm-hmm.
for the livestock, and provide ecosystem services in terms of the insect diversity or honeybees or the pollinators, but also it helps in the fixing the nitrogens, that is helping the rebuilding the soil health. So it has a number of issues. Then not only that the nutrition, but of the economic the security, inclusiveness, so that the farmers just growing the only wheat or rice, and if the intercropping wheat or intercropping the relay cropping or like a crop rotations with the pulses and vegetables, they have secured their food security as well as their nutrient securities, but also the increased income. So it has the multiple the benefits to bring the more crop into the farming systems. I just talked about the crops, but you can also bring the trees, and
Mm-hmm.
bring the livestock, and integrated system way, what we call it. This is where the ones you are looking into the bring the all different components together into the compound farming systems.
Well, let's unpack that a little. Let's drive a little bit deeper into that. So, you're dealing mostly with smallholders, right? So, is that sort of on the fewer than 5 acres, or maybe even smaller? Are you looking at maybe 2 acres or less parcels? So, does that sound about right?
Very true. Like most of we work in the developing part of the developing world, and on average, the landholding less than 2 acres. So
Okay.
it's much lesser than that. And but these smallholders are still feeding the world in terms of the nutritional the security, because of there's still quite diversity is there, and this is where we need to bring the hope as you can improve the diversity there. So
So, some of the folks in our chat room have experience in gardening and farming, and Sarah mentions that 2 acres will still keep you pretty busy, and especially if you're working in a multi-species, multi-story cropping system, where timing, different irrigation patterns, different planting depths, and so tell us a little bit more about the practical implications of changing from a monoculture cropping system at the 2 acre or smaller level, and what does a farmer need to do? What kind of changes are you guiding farmers towards, and what's the experience like for them?
this is what we call the multi-layer farming. That's what we call polyculture as well, and even permaculture, floriculture, natural farming. You have a number of different ways. Here we try to integrate like a combination of the species together, so the different layers. For example, what I call even like a small the experimental plot, you can do it in your own home garden. What you call border tree, the multi-layer farming or gardening, so that you're trying to the assemblage and combination of species in the different layers of the growth. Some they grow under the soil, some of the layers like the surface of the soil, and some in the intermediate the level, some in the top canopy. It's simple, basically replicating the mimicking the natural forest. Go to the forest, you can see different layer of the trees growing, the different stories of the forest, but they are living so the well connected, well interacted, that one. So this is where we bought it, a natural farming the systems were integrating the different species together based on their symbiotic relationships, and also size specific. For example, we cannot grow the particular species, for example, the sugarcane everywhere, but you can grow it providing the lot of external inputs to that one. But ecological niche, they have their own niche where the particular species can grow. They should be grow there only. But when the particular only we segregated only few species to be dominant crop system, then we can started growing the same species everywhere. So there's where we are impacted a lot of the ecological, the what's called footprint, and collapsing the systems. But if you bring this integrated systems where the integrated trees, different crop types, and together, I think that is your compounding productivity is much higher.
Mm.
But also it's build a symbiotic relations. The nutritional density is too high. When you grow more than one species in the given locations, they interact together, and mycelial network, fungus do a lot of the work and the below the soil. That increases a lot of microbial activity. That's what we call the basis of the healthy soil is the diversity.
So I think that home gardeners might be familiar with an example of what you're talking about, in if they're familiar with the Three Sisters concept of sort of growing ground cover of squash, and then you have
corn, and
corn, and then you have a legume growing up on the corn, and you have a lot of this extremely beneficial symbiosis among the plants. And but what you're talking about you're talking about like taking that to a whole nother level, literally a whole nother level, and incorporating nut trees and fruit trees, and that's amazing and fantastic. But the practical process of doing this is got to be so different from just taking a tractor, a combine across a field of wheat or millet or corn, right? So what kind of tools and equipment and labor systems are farmers using in this new
see, like when we're talking about the millions of the smallholders, and the most of the smallholders still they use the hand tools to do that. And but if you look into the large farmers, they're using like 12 rows of 24, 18 rows of the big tractors to operate them. And now still the machinery they're reducing into the very smaller, and now they can't handle the small tractors and tillers, so they can use that one to the manures, improve the like a skill, the efficiency of the labor, and also like a youth. They are still not want to do the traditional way of farming, so they need some. If bring this small kind of the tools and gadgets in the farming system. I think this is where they can attract them back to the farming. Otherwise, they are going away from the farming system. So this is where there are a lot of the changes happening. And also like this the multi-layer farming or natural is not new. It's in fact ancient system of farming. We have been throughout the world, every country used to be following that. But so that we have to just revitalizing them so that in the modern system, so that we can how best we can use the facilitate in terms of whether what kind of different crop rotations required and seed requirements. Sometimes we need different seeds to fit into the particular crop rotations. Then also like a small machinery so that it can improve the efficiency of the farming systems. So this is where the world is moving towards the kind of a combination of the local intelligence with the small machineries that put them together so that it cannot compact too much of the big tractors to do in the small scale. So that here we have to like a very light one so that it can only the little bit impact on the soil compactions, but it do the help the speed up the work for smallholders.
You bring up a few super important points and interesting points there. So we're talking about acknowledging that a lot of the practices that you're doing research around and building science around and programming around is, it comes from indigenous, historical and ancestral practices, right? So really we're not talking about mind-blowing brand new concepts that people have a really difficult time getting their imagination around. We can point to examples of these systems working, right? What kind of embrace or resistance have you seen from farmers, and sort of tell me a little bit about how you're opening the door to these new systems and bringing farmers and communities along in with them?
Especially the smallholder farmers, they are basically carbon neutral. They are not the polluters. And secondly, they not want to use all these the too much of chemicals or fertilizers, but the market demand for that. For example, take simple example. If the farmers take a particular vegetables with some hole or eaten by the insect, the market reject that, right? So in order to avoid that one, so that he can spray the chemicals to keep them is healthy. And but when I talk to the individual farmer, that they really did not want to use the chemicals. Even some farmer they grow themselves without spraying the chemicals because the market consumer demand is looking for. That's what when I talk to the elite people in the urban, so that because mostly 60% of people living in the cities, and if they bring the education like that, what I started is elite the group educating elite group the urban farming, so they know that how the food is grown, where the food is come from that. And asking them, at least you grow one vegetable yourself, they know the value of that tomato, so that they won't waste that food waste is drastic when they're aware of that where the food come from and how much the farmers they put effort to grow that particular food. And then this is where I thought the crux of the changing the food waste and the connect to the nature. And the question is that how best the farmers can bring this. So this is basically how to create a demand and then make the affordable supply, right? So that we provide too much of the subsidies to the unhealthy practices, but there is no incentive for doing the good practices. So, for example, if I grow something in chemical-based farming, I can sell it. I not required a certification. But if I grow something organic, I need a certification.
Right.
So this is where the unfair happens to someone wanted to practice the good practices. So this is where the world moving towards the natural-based solutions, where the incentive for someone who is doing good for the planet, good for the people, good for the society. I think this is what we should be moving towards.
Yeah, and so you and I have talked a little bit about this previously, but this isn't just some hearkening back to a nostalgic past, right? There's economic viability to these systems, right? And farmers aren't just transitioning to these because they feel good about the environmental implications. There are real life economic and financial benefits to this, right? So tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, I can say the simple example, instead of going too many crops, I just take one example. In India, we are working on like the rice fallows, nearly about the 12 to 15 million hectare the rice left fallows after the rice harvested. Right, this is called dynamics. So the amount of the rice the planted, the harvested depend on the monsoons, so that it anywhere ranges between 11 to the 15 million hectares. But after that harvested, if the farmers grow the legumes, for example, lentil, chickpea, fava bean, after the rice harvested, still there is a what you call residual soil moisture and residual nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In an average, the farmers make a 10,000 rupees after they grow only rice. After the rice, they grow the pulses. The income is increased nearly three to four times.
Wow.
Fold. So that it's provide the economic security for them as well, and also nutrition security, and is also ecological security. So this is what we need to bring back, that's forgotten systems. So used to go in the past nearly about I think 65,000 of land races they used to grow on the given farming systems. Now we are going hardly the few hundred the variety altogether. But if you look in the pulses, it used to go so many types of the pulses in that farming systems. Now we are hardly going more the countable in number in 12 to 15 the pulses altogether.
And what kind of distribution systems exist for if you're working with 12 different varieties of products that you've harvested within a week or 2 weeks, what kind of distribution systems and consumer connections do farmers have available to them?
This is one the very important criteria, because of one of the reasons farmers earlier not wanted to grow particular crops, because of there is no guaranteed the market for that.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you take the major crops, the core pulses, cereals like wheat, rice, and the soybean, corn. So there is guaranteed market. That's so that farmers, if you grow them, they can buy. Someone is buyer is there. But now the change in the policy, because this demand comes, now the support prices is the given to the most of those pulses, so that farmers they have the guarantee at least there is a market is there. That's one thing. And secondly, there is a government taking a lot of the initiative, the developmental banks, they're providing a lot of the funding, like for example, IFAD and ICR and the World Bank, they're initiating a lot of this the incentive programs, so that you can establish the local dal mills, so that you can process the dal there, can provide distribution there, and provide also like now because the expanding happening, and also seed requirement, so that farmers sell their seeds, they have the part of their produce as the seeds to the multiplications. So there is a guaranteed market is coming up, and especially during this COVID time, and people understood that they have to increase the more number of the food they eat and consume a lot of this. So the drastically increasing demand for the diversity in the crops. And also a lot of the government schemes and NGOs and non-profit organizations working to diversify the food systems. So this huge things is happening, like a lot of several initiatives happening. I think this is where the farmers, they're getting the confidence that if I grow the different crop, new crop, there is at least there is a market is there. So I think this is where we're heading towards.
Well, I got to tell you, that's super encouraging for me to hear. Obviously, I support farming. I'm so glad to see that there are new regenerative and more sustainable farming systems that are being advanced formally, and that there are these sort of high-level institutional supports for them. And we're just about out of time as it happens, but I think that's a hopeful and promising note to sort of wrap up our episode with today. But Dr. Biradar, it's been a true pleasure to have this conversation with you. We're going to go into a second segment of our broadcast today, where we're just chatting. But for now, we'll sort of wrap up this segment, and I'll just say thank you so much for joining us. And I really look forward to having you back on our channel again, where we obviously have no shortage of super interesting topics to cover with you. So if you'll just hold on with me for a moment, we'll pause for the conclusion and then come back to just chatting, okay?
Sure. Thank you, Toby. Thanks for the very interesting questions and providing the opportunity to speak about the agroecosystems.
Thank you so much.